The training arena echoed with the sounds of footsteps and whirring machines. It wasn't Earth, but a massive orbital station where the strongest soldiers from across the galaxy came to test their limits. Among them stood Kale, the only human. Selected for this brutal elite training program, he wore no armor, just a gray shirt and military pants. Around him, alien warriors from dozens of species whispered and smirked. Most of them were larger, stronger, faster. Especially her, Zareth of Vel'takar, the feared blue-skinned elite soldier of the outer reaches. She was taller than Kale, wrapped in gleaming battle armor, her yellow eyes glowing like fire. She had broken 3 bones in yesterday's trial, none of them hers. When the instructor announced hand-to-hand combat pairing, Zareth stepped forward without hesitation. Her voice was calm, but laced with arrogance as she said, "I'll take the human. Let's not waste time." The crowd laughed. Kale didn't. He simply nodded and stepped onto the platform. The match began fast. Zareth launched first, expecting an easy takedown. But Kale moved like smoke. He dodged, slipped, then countered with a precise palm strike that sent her stumbling. Her tail flicked in disbelief. Gasps filled the room. No one had ever made her move like that. She blinked, reassessed, then attacked again, harder this time. Claws out, full speed, no mercy. But Kale twisted, ducked, and flipped her over his shoulder with flawless timing. Her armored body slammed into the floor. She looked up in shock, not pained surprise. Real surprise. Zareth rolled to her feet and crouched low, her stance changing. This wasn't just about testing him anymore. It was about understanding. Kale didn't smirk, he didn't taunt. He only said one thing, calm and focused. "You think we're weak. That's your mistake." She charged again, now respecting him as an equal. For 5 minutes they fought, a blur of fists, kicks, flips, and sheer instinct. No one had ever kept up with her this long. Kale wasn't just trained. He was different. When she finally landed a blow, his lips split. Blood dripped down his chin. He didn't step back. Instead, he pushed forward, locking her arms and sweeping her legs in a clean, fluid move. This time, he pinned her to the ground. Her breathing was heavy. His hands gripped her armor at the shoulders, their eyes locked. There was no hatred in his gaze, just fire. The instructor called the match. Combat ended. Human wins by tactical hold. The silence was loud. Then murmurs began, not of mockery but respect. Several of the aliens looked at Kale differently now. Even those who had doubted him from the start. Zareth remained on the ground for a moment longer, processing. Then she pushed him off gently and rose to her feet. "You're not what I expected," she admitted, voice softer than before. Kale shrugged. "None of us are." Later that night, she found him in the mess hall, eating quietly. She sat across from him without asking. Her hair was damp from the training shower. Her face had no paint or armor now. Just herself. She stared at him in silence. Then finally asked, "Are all humans like you?" Kale looked at her. "No, some are much scarier." She blinked, unsure if it was a joke or a warning. Maybe both. In the following days, Zareth trained differently, less pride, more precision. She watched Kale more than anyone else. And when paired again, she gave him everything she had. But Kale always adapted, not stronger, not faster, but smarter. Every time he found a way. And it unsettled her deeply. What frightened her wasn't just his strength. It was that he fought. Without rage, without ego. And never out of cruelty. By the end of the week, Zareth no longer rolled her eyes when Kale entered the room. She straightened her back. She focused harder. She knew now what the others were slowly learning. Humanity was not the weakest link in the galaxy. It was the unknown variable. And nothing was more dangerous than the unknown. Zareth stood in front of the mirror, her blue skin marked with light bruises from yesterday's sparring match. No one had ever touched her like that in combat. Not with strength, but with control. Her tail flicked in thought as she studied her reflection. She had trained in 13 war zones. She had survived blade storms and zero-gravity sieges. But the human had shaken something deeper. The other recruits spoke of Kale differently now. They watched his quiet footsteps. They whispered about his patience, his eyes, the way he never yelled yet commanded attention with silence. One by one, the smugness of the alien warriors turned into caution. They no longer volunteered to face him. Some even avoided him in the halls. Zareth, however, did not. She requested to train beside him. Not as a challenge, but to learn. "Teach me that move," she said one morning, tapping her armored wrist where he had pinned her during their first fight. Kale raised an eyebrow. "You mean the shoulder lock?" She nodded without blinking. He walked over, adjusted her stance, and showed her again, step by step. His hands moved with clarity, not one wasted motion. She followed without question, absorbing everything. As the weeks passed, they trained together often, their movements synchronized. She learned more in one cycle beside Kale than she had in years of combat. Others noticed. Some mocked her. Why does the mighty Zareth follow the human like a pup? One reptilian warrior joked. She ignored them. Kale, however, stood and walked straight to the speaker. His voice calm, but unshakable. Care to test that theory? The room went quiet. The warrior declined. That night, no one laughed at her again. Zareth's body adapted quickly. Her strikes became cleaner, her breathing more controlled. But what changed most was her thinking. She stopped rushing. She started calculating. Where once she attacked with pride, now she attacked with purpose. Kale taught her restraint. Taught her how to read an opponent's center, not their eyes. He never claimed superiority. He never even raised his voice, yet the instructors praised him more than anyone. "This human doesn't just fight," one said. "He studies. He survives. He wins." Zareth began to see something else in him. Not just a warrior, but a mind built for battle. A quiet storm inside flesh. One evening after drills, they sat on the edge of the observation deck. Below them spun the curve of a blue gas giant, its clouds glowing like fire under the station lights. Zareth leaned back, eyes closed. "I used to think you were beneath me." Kale said nothing. "But now," she added, "I wonder if I'm running to catch up." He looked at her. "You don't have to outrun anyone. You only have to outgrow your limits." His words lingered longer than she expected. She turned toward him, noticing the scar under his jaw for the first time. "How did you get that?" she asked. Kale looked distant for a moment. "Earth, first ambush I survived. My unit didn't." Zareth lowered her gaze. "I'm sorry." He shook his head. "It's what shaped me." Their silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy with understanding. Two warriors from different stars, finding something strangely familiar. The next day, the instructors announced the survival trials. Each pair would be dropped on a harsh alien moon. No tech. No backup, just instinct and skill. Zareth immediately stepped beside Kale. "We go together." He nodded. They were dropped at dusk. The moon's atmosphere was thin, the terrain sharp, with frozen crystals and molten cracks. Danger lived in every corner. For 2 days they moved like shadows, working as one. Kale tracked food. Zareth fought off beasts. When the storm came, they built shelter together using cave bones and heat stones. Zareth shivered through the night. Kale pulled her closer, sharing body warmth without shame. "Rest, I'll take first watch." She felt safe. A strange feeling. For someone who trusted no one for most of her life. By the 5th day, they reached the extraction point. They were the first pair to survive and return with 0 injuries. The commander simply nodded as they stepped off the transport. "Well done," he said. "You didn't just survive. You thrived." That night, Zareth returned to her quarters alone. But she didn't sleep. She stared at the wall, her heart beating louder than usual. She didn't understand it fully, not yet. But the way Kale looked at the world had changed. And she knew one thing for sure. She would never underestimate a human again. Zareth awoke to the sound of alarms echoing through the station walls. The red lights flashed across her room. A voice announced over the intercom, "Emergency lockdown. Sector 7 compromised. All elite personnel report immediately." She was already standing. Her armor snapped into place in seconds. Her claws tightened into fists. Something had gone wrong. In the corridor, soldiers ran in every direction. Smoke curled from one hallway, and the floor trembled beneath her boots. She didn't wait for orders. She sprinted straight to Sector 7. There she found Kale. He was crouched beside a wounded tech officer, pressing cloth to a deep wound. His shirt was torn. Blood ran down one arm, but he didn't stop. Zareth ran to him and dropped to one knee. What happened? Kale didn't look up. Containment breach. Unknown entity. It's loose in the engineering wing. I sent a distress signal, but it jammed the comms. Before she could ask more, a roar echoed down the metal corridor. Not mechanical, alive, and close. Zareth stood, drew her blade, and moved to cover him. "Go, I'll hold it off." Kale lifted the tech officer and carried him to safety. When he returned, she was still alive, but barely. Her armor was scratched, shoulder bleeding, and the floor burned where acid had sprayed. He threw her a med pack and fired a stun grenade down the hallway. Whatever the thing was, it screamed and backed off into the smoke. Zareth leaned against the wall, panting. "It's not natural. That thing didn't move like anything I've trained for." Kale helped her stand. "Then we adapt." They advanced side by side. The hallways were dark now. Lights flickered. Fluid leaked from burst pipes. The smell was wrong. Like rot and fire together, the creature struck again from the ceiling. It was fast, 6 limbs, acid breath, armored scales. Zareth slashed, Kale fired. It dodged both. They retreated to a side room, sealed the door behind them, and caught their breath. She looked at him, her hands trembling. "We're outmatched." Kale checked his weapon. "Only if we play by its rules." He pulled a schematic from the wall, studied the vents, and mapped a trap in seconds. Zareth followed his eyes, then nodded. "We draw it here, drop the floor, and burn the shaft." They split to set the charges. It was risky. Every step meant facing the creature again. But they didn't hesitate. When it returned, it came faster. Angrier. Kale baited it through the corridor, ducking behind pillars, drawing its fire. Zareth waited at the trigger point, fingers steady. As it lunged for Kale, she slammed the control. The floor opened. The beast fell, roaring in fury. Kale dropped the ignition core and sealed the hatch. A wall of fire lit the station from below. Then silence. They stood there, panting, sweat pouring from their skin. Zareth turned to him. "You saved us," Kale shrugged. "You fought like hell." "I just lit the fire." She smiled for the first time in days. It wasn't a warrior's smile. It was something else. Lighter, warmer. The commander later reviewed the footage. "You acted without hesitation, risked your lives, protected the crew, both of you." He handed them commendation pins. "You're no longer trainees. You're elite now." Zareth looked at the silver pin resting in her palm. It was shaped like a shield, engraved with a burning star. She had dreamed of this moment for years. Kale placed his in his pocket without a word. Later that night, they sat again at the edge of the observation deck. No words for a while. Just space outside the glass, stars sliding past like slow rain. Zareth turned toward him. "You don't celebrate." Kale shook his head. "I don't fight for medals." She studied his face. "Then what do you fight for?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "For the ones who can't." That sentence stayed with her, not just for the night, but for every mission after. The more she trained beside him, the more she understood. Humanity's strength wasn't in brute force. It was in the quiet way they refused to quit. Kale never shouted, never bragged. But when the alarm rang, he was always the first to move. She once asked the instructor, what made them send him here alone? The reply was simple. He volunteered. That surprised her. She had assumed he was ordered, pushed, trapped into this alliance. But no, he chose it. And suddenly she saw him not just as a partner, but as a mystery still unfolding. A fire she couldn't predict. One day, after drills, she approached him in the gym. "Train with me. I want to fight like you." He nodded. "Then don't fight to win. Fight to protect." She repeated those words later during solo drills. Again and again, because something inside her was changing. Slowly, deeply, quietly. The new assignment came without warning. A coded message flashed across every elite warrior's interface. Operation Veilstorm. Deployment in 6 hours. All team leaders report to War Room Alpha. Kale and Zareth stood side by side in the debrief chamber. The holomap displayed a hostile moon covered in fog storms, magnetic anomalies, and unknown enemy movement. The mission was dangerous, even for elites. They were assigned as co-commanders. It surprised many. A human and an alien sharing authority in the field. But no one dared question it aloud. The transport ship descended through thick violet clouds. Lightning cracked outside the windows. Zareth adjusted her armor, her expression calm. Kale stared out the window in silence, thinking. Their mission was to locate a missing science unit. Last signal came from a hidden valley inside a storm zone. No drones could survive the interference. Only boots on the ground would do. They landed. In silence, mist covered everything. Visibility was low. Scanners failed, radios distorted. It was a place built to swallow hope. Kale led the squad with steady steps. Zareth covered the flank. Every warrior followed without question. Even the most hardened veterans had started to respect the pair. After 3 kilometers, they found wreckage. A broken cum dish, a half-melted helmet, signs of struggle, and strange black residue clinging to the rocks. Zareth crouched beside the remains. "This isn't tech damage. Something organic attacked them." Kale nodded. "We're not alone." Out here, they moved cautiously. No words wasted. Every sound felt louder in the silence. The air tasted like metal. Suddenly one of their scouts vanished. No scream, no trace. Just gone. Zareth spun toward the last position, blades drawn. Eyes up, weapons ready. Kale raised his hand and pointed toward the cliffside. A shimmer in the mist, movement that bent light unnaturally. There, the creature revealed itself with a hiss. A chameleon-like beast, tall as a building, shifting color with the fog. It struck fast, claws like razors, jaws wide enough to bite a soldier in half. Kale and Zareth didn't panic. They moved like one body. She flanked right, slicing its tendons. He fired at its eyes, driving it back. It shrieked and vanished again into the mist. The squad formed a defensive ring. One soldier shouted, "It's hunting us," Zareth replied. "Then let's make it bleed." They moved into the valley and found the science unit's last shelter torn apart. Inside were survivors. 2 researchers, injured, hiding beneath a heat tarp, their eyes wide with fear. Kale knelt beside them. "You're safe now. Stay quiet. We'll get you out." But the creature returned. This time with more speed. It had learned. It went for the weak first. Zareth threw herself between the beast and the scientists. She slashed upward, leaving a burning cut across its chest. It roared and swiped, sending her flying into the rocks. Kale didn't blink. He charged forward, climbed the creature's back, and shoved an explosive between its armored scales. As it twisted to shake him off, he leapt clear and detonated the charge. The blast echoed through the valley. The beast collapsed, twitching, then stilled. Zareth groaned and stood slowly. Her side burned, but she was still breathing. "You always find the fastest way to get killed," Kale smirked. "But it works." The squad secured the area. The scientists were lifted to the evac ship. As they rose through the clouds, Zareth leaned back and stared at the ceiling. "I used to believe I was the best. Now I just want to be better." Kale sat beside her. "That's why you'll never stop improving." When they returned to base, something had changed. They weren't just respected. They were admired. Not because they were the strongest, but because they never gave up. Zareth walked into the training ring and found new recruits mimicking Kale's stance, copying his balance, studying his footwork. She smiled slightly. "He's becoming a legend." One of the recruits approached her. "Is it true he once fought a full squad with no weapon?" Zareth replied, "He had a purpose. That's more dangerous than any blade." That evening, Kale found her sitting alone on the catwalk above the training floor. The stars were visible through the high glass. She didn't look at him. "They'll never look at me the same way again." Kale sat beside her. "You mean they finally see who you are?" She glanced at him. "No, I mean they see who I am with you." He said nothing, but the silence between them held more meaning than words could offer. Zareth didn't know when it happened. When trust turned into respect. When respect turned into something else. But it had happened, quietly, inevitably, and she wasn't afraid of it. The council chamber was silent when Kale and Zareth entered. High-ranking officers from dozens of alien races sat in curved rows, each with sharp eyes and sharper opinions. A war was brewing. Not a skirmish or border dispute, but a full-scale planetary threat. A rogue hive from the outer spiral had begun consuming colonies one by one. Their last assault wiped out 3 defense fleets in under an hour. The council needed a team that could do more than follow orders. They needed leaders who could think, adapt, and survive when everything went wrong. The room filled with whispers as the 2 warriors stepped forward. Some looked at Kale with doubt, others at Zareth with cautious respect. Together, they were a symbol of something rare: unity earned through fire. The head commander stood. "We've selected the 2 of you to lead the first strike into the hive world. You will breach the core, locate the source, and disable their network before they spread to our central systems." Zareth didn't flinch. Kale simply asked, "What's the casualty estimate if we fail?" The answer came cold and fast. "Every species in this alliance." Preparations began at once. The infiltration squad was small. 12 of the best across the stars. Each selected by Kale and Zareth themselves. Before departure, Zareth stood in front of the armory mirror, adjusting her gear. Her reflection looked back with new weight. Not just a warrior, now a leader. Kale joined her, his voice steady. "Are you ready?" She didn't smile. "No, but I'm going anyway." They boarded the stealth cruiser and entered dark space. The silence of the void was broken only by the low hum of systems and the quiet breaths of the crew. Inside the hive world's atmosphere, everything changed. The sky pulsed with black clouds and green lightning. Spires of bone and metal rose from the ground like claws. The air was thick with static and spores. As they landed, Kale scanned the surface. No welcoming party. "That's not good." Zareth checked her blades. "It means they're waiting. Watching." They moved through the twisted terrain, past rivers of molten sludge and nests wrapped in flesh metal vines. The deeper they went, the darker it became. Light seemed to bend around the hive walls. The first ambush came from below. Burrowed creatures erupted from the ground. 6-legged, eyeless, dripping venom. The team reacted fast. Blades clashed. Guns roared. But the beasts were endless. Zareth led the charge forward. "Keep moving. We don't hold ground. We take it." Kale stayed at the rear, covering the squad, placing thermal charges to collapse tunnels behind them. Every step forward was paid in blood and breath. By the time they reached the central spire, 4 were injured, 2 were dead. Zareth crouched beside one of them, pressing her hand to his neck. He was gone. Kale placed a hand on her shoulder. "We carry them by finishing this." She nodded once, then stood. The core chamber was unlike anything they'd seen. A pulsing brain of organic light floated above a pit of liquid data, tentacles linked to every corner of the hive. The source of the enemy's coordination. Kale stepped forward, analyzing the patterns. "If we hit this right, we break the entire command web." "They'll go blind," Zareth asked. "What if we're wrong?" He answered calmly. "Then we die fast." They planted the core detonators while fending off waves of defenders. Kale timed every step like a dance. Zareth's blades moved with deadly rhythm. The two fought back to back, perfectly in sync. One of the final beasts lunged at Kale from behind. Zareth threw herself between them, taking the blow across her armor. She fell hard, wind knocked from her chest. Kale turned, fury in his eyes. He emptied his weapon into the beast's skull, then pulled Zareth up. "You all right?" She coughed once, then nodded. "We're finishing this." No excuses. With the last charge armed, they sprinted for the extraction zone. The countdown began. Behind them, the hive trembled as its mind burned. The cruiser lifted seconds before the explosion. From orbit, they watched the spire collapse into itself, the shockwave flattening everything for miles. Silence filled the cockpit. The crew sat covered in sweat and blood. Kale looked to Zareth. She looked back. No words were needed. When they returned to the station, the council waited again. This time, there were no questions. No doubts. Only silence and then applause. Zareth stood straighter than ever. Kale nodded once and turned away, heading toward the exit. But she followed, outside the chamber. She caught up. "You keep walking like none of this means anything." Kale stopped. "It means everything. That's why I can't stop." She stepped closer. "You don't have to do it alone." He looked at her then. Really looked. And for once, let the weight show on his face. Zareth saw it all. The scars, the fire, the heart beneath the steel. She didn't say another word. She didn't have to. The following weeks brought silence from the hive worlds. The war front calmed. Colonies once marked for death slowly began to rebuild. But peace always came with shadows. Zareth spent her nights in the training hall alone. Her strikes were faster, her focus sharper. Yet something inside her still burned quietly. Kale was different now. Not in action, but in presence. He spoke less, slept less, watched more. Every corridor he walked felt heavier under his boots. One evening, she found him standing alone at the edge of the platform overlooking the black star belt. His gaze was locked on the infinite dark. "You don't rest anymore," she said. Kale replied without turning. "Can't afford to." "Not yet." Zareth stepped closer. "The threat is gone. For now. You did your part." He looked at her. "That's the thing. There's always another threat. Another mission. Another loss waiting to happen." She stared at him quietly. "You're not a machine, Kale. You bleed like the rest of us." He didn't argue. He didn't have to. A message came the next morning. Not from command, but from Earth. An old transmission finally reached him. It was weak, crackled, and dated by months. But it carried weight. A voice spoke from the past. "Kale, this is Colonel Mira. If you're hearing this, then you're still out there. We need you back. Earth's defenses are falling. We have no one left." The air in the room shifted. Zareth read the message beside him, her voice low. "You're being called home." Kale didn't answer immediately. He closed his eyes. His fiercest tightened. I never thought I'd hear her voice again. Zareth placed a hand on his arm. Then go. If they need you, you go. He turned to her, and for a moment his eyes softened. And what about here? She held his gaze. This place has me. But Earth needs you. There was no goodbye ceremony. No speech. Just a quiet departure. Kale walked toward the transport bay with his bag slung over one shoulder and a storm. Behind his eyes, Zareth stood on the balcony as the ship took off. She didn't wave. She didn't move. But her heart felt heavier than her armor had ever been. In the days that followed, she resumed command alone. Her voice carried more power now. Soldiers obeyed her not out of fear, but out of trust. Still. At night, she would pause in the corridor outside the room he used to stay in, just for a second. Just to remember, reports came in slowly from Earth. The planet had survived the first assault, but reinforcements were thin. Kale was seen leading resistance units in burned cities, holding ground no one else could. Zareth read every word, memorized every line. She kept them locked in her data core like sacred scripture. Then one day, the message stopped. 3 weeks. No update, no signal, no confirmation. She stood in front of the command panel, unmoving, her chest tight, her throat dry. The room behind her whispered, "Maybe he's gone." But she didn't believe it, not until she saw proof. She requested a vessel. Not a warship, but a long-range scout, faster, lighter, unauthorized. The commander denied it. "You're needed here. We have peace to protect," Zareth stared at him, then protect it. "I have a warrior to find." She left the same night, alone, no escort. No orders, just her and the stars. The journey to Earth was not easy. Patrols blocked sectors. Gravity storms shifted course. But she flew. Through them all with burning eyes. When she reached Earth's orbit, the planet looked wounded. Cities burned, oceans scarred. But still alive, she landed near a ruined outpost marked by black smoke. Her scanners picked up faint human signals. She followed them through dust and rubble. Finally, deep in the ruins of a collapsed tower, she found him. Kale sat against a broken wall. One leg wrapped in cloth, a rifle across his knees. His armor cracked, his face bruised. But breathing, Zareth dropped to one knee in front of him. Her voice barely above a whisper, "You idiot. You didn't call." Kale looked up. A small smile broke through the pain. "Didn't think anyone would come." She punched his shoulder. Then leaned in close. "Of course I came." He closed his eyes. Resting for the first time in weeks, and for a long moment, neither of them said anything more, because sometimes words were too small for the fire that lived between two souls who had bled for each other. The wind across Earth's broken plains carried more ash than air. Zareth wrapped a scarf around her mouth as she helped Kale limp toward the nearest functioning shelter. He leaned on her without shame. Buildings stood like skeletons. Power lines sagged. Drones hovered overhead, scanning for signs of hostile life. But this time, the enemies were gone. What remained was the aftermath. Inside the shelter, a few civilians stared wide-eyed at Zareth. Most had never seen her kind before. Atia, blue-skinned alien warrior with golden eyes and twin blades on her back. Kale smiled faintly. "Don't worry. She's the one who saves people, not eats them." Zareth helped him onto a cot and began checking his wounds. She worked quickly, silently. Her hands knew exactly where the pain was before he told her. Kale winced. "I forgot how gentle you can be when you're not throwing me across a battlefield." She looked at him. "Don't make me regret coming." Outside, relief ships from nearby colonies began arriving. Food, water, and medicine were handed out. Refugees formed lines. Earth was beginning to breathe again, but Zareth didn't rest. She stayed by Kale's side. monitored his vitals, filed reports to the Alliance, denied every request to return. "You're needed on the station," one message said. She replied simply, "Not until he walks again." Kale hated being still. But he didn't fight her. Not this time. One morning, he sat up and tested his leg. The pain shot through him, but he stood anyway. "I'm not dead yet." Zareth was standing in the doorway. Arms crossed. "Then prove it." "Let's see you." "Move." She supported him as he walked the corridor slowly. Step by step. Sweat dripped from his brow. His jaw clenched. But he didn't fall. Every step was a promise. After 3 days, he moved without help. After 5, he trained again. Slower, but with purpose. Zareth sparred with him, careful at first. But he insisted on full force. "If I can't survive your blade, I don't belong in the fight." She gave him what he asked for. Not out of pride, but out of belief. Each clash reminded them of who they were, and why they fought. When Kale finally knocked her to the mat with a clean sweep, she laughed for the first time in weeks. "There he is." He reached down and pulled her up. "Missed me?" She didn't answer, but the look in her eyes said everything. The next day, a new mission came. A border colony was under siege from a pirate fleet. The Alliance requested reinforcements. Fast. Kale looked at Zareth. "You ready to go back?" She nodded. "Are you?" They boarded the dropship together. No hesitation, no second thoughts. Just the rhythm of warriors who had already bled, healed, and chosen to bleed again. The team was smaller this time. Just 5, but every one of them trusted Kale and Zareth without question. When they landed, the colony was already burning. Civilians trapped. Defense systems offline. Pirates circling like wolves. Kale gave quick orders. "Evacuate the central block first. Push them toward the water tunnel. We hold the square." Zareth moved like lightning. Her blades danced through the smoke. Every strike was precise. Every move protected someone. Kale fought with raw fire. His rifle never missed. His body moved like it remembered pain and refused to feel it again. Together, they turned the tide. Not because they were stronger, but because they were unbreakable. After the last pirate ship fled, the colony leader approached them. A young girl clutched her mother's arm, pointing at Zareth. "Is she a monster?" Kale knelt beside her. "She used to think humans were weak. Now she guards them with her life." The girl smiled. Zareth smiled back. That night, they sat beneath the broken stars. The fires were out. The wounded treated. The people safe. Kale stretched his legs, wincing slightly. "We never stop, do we?" Zareth looked up at the sky. "We stop when there's nothing left worth saving." He turned to her. "And if I asked you to stop?" She didn't hesitate. "Only if you asked me to stay." He reached for her hand. She let him. For once, there was no war behind their eyes. Only peace between them. Hard-earned. Fragile. But real. And in that moment, under the stars of a half-healed world, 2 warriors who once stood on opposite ends of strength finally stood side by side. Peace had returned, but not the kind that stays forever. It was a pause. A moment of stillness between storms. Kale and Zareth stood at the edge of a rebuilt outpost, watching children play in the dust where craters used to burn. The colony had survived because of them. The people cheered their names, but neither of them smiled like heroes. They smiled like survivors. Kale leaned on the rail, arms crossed. "You ever think about leaving all this behind?" Zareth tilted her head. "You mean quit fighting?" He nodded. "Find a quiet world, disappear, grow food, fix engines, stay far from war." She looked at the horizon. "Once, I thought I would never stop. Now I wonder what silence might feel like." The council contacted them again. Not with orders this time, but with gratitude. Your service has altered the course of the war. We offer you both permanent rank and freedom to choose your next move. It was rare, an offer of peace. A door that opened once. Zareth sat alone that night, her hands resting on her knees. Her blades leaned against the wall, unused, polished, but her thoughts were far from combat. Kale entered quietly. He didn't ask what she had decided. Instead, he sat across from her. I've been fighting since I was 16, he said. Every year, every planet, just surviving. She listened without interrupting. But when I met you, it wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about changing what survival meant. She reached forward, her hand resting on his. I didn't come here to find a partner. I came to prove I was better than humans. Kale smiled. And? She squeezed his fingers. You ruined that plan. They both laughed, soft and quiet. Not loud enough to break the moment. The next day, they gathered their belongings. Not weapons, not armor. Just bags filled with clothes, books, small tools. Things meant for building, not destroying. They didn't say goodbye to everyone. Only to those who had shared fire and blood. As they stepped onto the shuttle, someone called after them. Where will you go? Kale turned. Where peace needs defending. The shuttle carried them beyond known colonies. Past the stars filled with politics and duty. They found a small green world, untouched by war. One village, one river. Sky with two suns. There they built a home, not a fortress. A real home, walls made of wood, roof of stone. A garden behind the door. And silence all around. Kale learned to farm. Zareth learned to cook. They failed often. Laughed more. They trained sometimes. Not to prepare but to stay sharp. Just in case. Once, a local boy asked them why they wore weapons while tending crops. Kale answered, because peace is worth protecting. Even here, Zareth added, and because warriors don't forget who they are. Even when they smile. Years passed. Slowly, softly, the fire in their blood cooled, but never died. They had no children, but the village children ran to them every day. Sat on their porch. Listened to tales of faraway battles, strange planets, and what it meant to stand between life and death. Zareth became a teacher. Kale fixed machines. They grew older, not weaker. One night, under a sky full of red stars, Kale sat beside her. On the porch, he held a worn photo in his hand. One of their first missions. Both of them bruised, armor cracked, standing tall. He looked at her. Would you do it again? She answered without delay. Only if I got to do it with you. Breeze passed between them, cool and calm. The world turned slowly beneath their feet. Not long after, a ship landed near the village. An officer stepped out, young, nervous, saluted Kale with trembling fingers. Sir, we need you. Another frontier is falling. They're asking for the legends. Kale looked at Zareth. Her eyes didn't narrow. They didn't widen. She simply stood and picked up her old blade. No legends here. Just two tired fighters. The officer hesitated. Will you come? Kale took her hand. Not this time. We've earned our silence. They watched the ship lift away. Then turned back toward their small garden. The weeds had returned. The fruit was overripe. But it was theirs. And as the sun dipped behind the hills, the warrior and the soldier, once strangers from different worlds, stood in the light together, not as enemies, not as allies, but as something stronger.